Side language. For assistance on choosing language options, use the link on the bottom of the agenda or visit cityofmalden.org/captions for further instructions. It should be expected that live caption translations are not perfect, but as the technology continues to improve, so will the delivery of this important feature. And now, Councilor Linehan. Here. Councilor Crowe, on her way. Councilor O'Malley. Here. Councilor Taylor. Here. Chair Winslow.
Here. All right. So next order of business is minutes to be approved of December 10th and December 17th. People have the opportunity to review those.
Move to approve.
I mean, I think we'd have the motion from, we have to, okay.
I can second.
Okay, so Councilor Taylor, Councilor O'Malley moving to approve that, second by Councilor O'Malley. Any further discussion? So all those in favor of approving the minutes of the 10th and the 17th, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so the minutes are approved. All right, so clerk will read the next order of business.
Paper 13-25 be ordained by the City of Malden City Council that the Code of the City of Malden, Title 12 Zoning, is hereby amended to establish requirements and regulations for accessory dwelling units, including definitions in the establishment of site plan review committee for accessory dwelling units by amending chapters and sections 12.030, 16.010, 20.010, 32.060, and by adding new subsections 12.28.010K, 32.030D, 32030E. And in front of you, I have packets of the changes and also the addendum that was added at the last council meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you, Carolyn. So I think just to talk about, we have an hour or so to just to structure the meeting. What I thought is Michelle, the planner, has offered to kind of brief us. Okay, there you are. You are over here. Okay, and we're going to have Michelle kind of present on what the mayor presented, because we didn't have enough time at the council meeting the other day to do that. And then what I thought is that then I had introduced kind of an alternative approach, and I think what it comes down, there's sort of kind of 5 key topics that we maybe didn't discuss is related to sort of intensity of use, reasonableness of dimensional controls. Number 1, whether there could be any relief from the dimensional controls, extent of site plan review, parking requirement, and the make up the site plan review. So those are the kind of 5 things I think we should work to discuss. But let's have Michelle kick off and explain the paper that was sent down, and people can ask questions. But I think in terms of discussing any particular section, then we would wait and talk about those issues in that order. Thank you.
Okay, so if you want to follow along, I'm looking at this paper 13-25. I'm looking at the legislation details with text. I don't know if people have this version or what, but it should, all the section numbers should be the same. So first, the first section is proposing to amend our table of use regulations. So that's the chart, the table in the city zoning ordinance that states the different use categories, residential use categories, institutional, business, industrial. So this is a residential use category. Accessory dwelling unit is what it's called. You also have another proposed use category called accessory dwelling second or subsequent ADU. The state law does require regulation of 2 types of accessory dwelling units. One is just the first one, accessory dwelling unit, and anything after the first one. I think the state law calls it more than one. We're calling it second or subsequent, hopefully for people's convenience, for ease of understanding. So you can see in the table, again, this is just a portion of the table with these 2 new use categories. You have the zoning districts across the top. A is residence A, B is residence B, residence C, RO is residential office, BN is neighborhood business, BC Central Business, BH is Highway Business, Industrial 1, Industrial 2, and you have the Marijuana Establishment Overlay District. So what is proposed in this paper is to regulate accessory dwelling units, the first accessory dwelling unit that may be added to a property through site plan review. So SPR means site plan review. If you were to look at the rest of the zoning ordinance, it defines what SP means, it says what SPR means, it says what no means, it says what yes means. That's not included in this paper, but that's in the zoning ordinance. So these letters correspond to that. No means prohibited. SPR means site plan review, SP means special permit. So accessory dwelling unit second or subsequent, so this would be the second accessory dwelling unit that's being potentially added to a property would require a special permit. Again, in those same districts, residence A, residence B, residence C, residential office, neighborhood business, prohibited in the other districts. Two things I'll just mention briefly here. The special permit requirement is required by state law. The state law says for more than one accessory dwelling unit, a special permit shall be required. So that's not an option, that's a shall, right? We're required to require the special permit. We're not required to grant a special permit, but we're required to regulate that through special permit regulations. The SPR is optional. The state law says we may regulate the first accessory dwelling unit through site plan review. It's allowed by right. Site plan review is not what's called a discretionary review or approval. It's still allowed by right. It's just a review process, an administrative review process that will occur. So we're not violating state law by requiring or proposing to require site plan review. It specifically says in the guidelines that we can use site plan review to regulate these first accessory dwelling units. So next section is 1216.010. That's table of intensity regulations, also known as table of dimensional controls. Again, this table is already in the zoning ordinance. I've just what's in this paper is just the headings, so you can see what each of these categories is. Each use that's identified in the zoning has its own set of intensity regulations. So this is what's proposed for the accessory dwelling unit. It says any all because these would be the regs for any or all accessory dwelling units, whether that's the first one, second one, or subsequent one. Minimum lot area, frontage, front yard setback, side yard setback, both side yards, rear yard, minimal usable open space, coverage, principal building, coverage, accessory building, density, and maximum height. So version I have is on 2 pages, but those are the different categories. What's being proposed are the regulations for single family dwellings. That is what the guideline says we can do. It states we cannot regulate these using dimensional controls or regulations stricter than we have for single family dwellings. So that is why we proposed the regulations that apply to single family dwellings to apply to accessory dwelling units. There is a note here that number sign is a footnote. We've run out of symbols for footnotes. There's so many footnotes in the table, so we're using number sign. So the number sign is just adding the footnote that for coverage of an accessory building, coverage means how much footprint, how much of the building covers the lot. We've added this footnote that is recommended be included that states, provided that coverage for an accessory building used as an accessory dwelling unit shall be no greater than 900 square feet. State law contains that requirement. Maximum size 900 square feet. Again, this is just the footprint. So.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, can I just clarify?
I'll let you finish. I don't want to interrupt your thought. I just wanted to get on this right.
Did you?
No,
did-
I can stop there.
Mental control or what?
Yeah, it was on this, but, so the both sides, I understand what side means when both sides, is that the sum of both sides?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I ask a questions are related?
Yes,
can I just
yes,
ask
yes,
that
just
same
question?
clarifications.
The second thing is, for the coverage of the accessory building, since it's limited to the 900 square feet, do we even need a percentage? Because wouldn't it be tied back to the principal building?
We need a percentage because the law actually says the size of the accessory dwelling unit is the 900 square feet is the maximum. So gross floor area, half the gross floor area of the principal dwelling or 900 square feet, whichever is smaller. So we do need that.
Because so like say you have the principal building is 1,000 square feet. The max you could ever be is 500 square feet.
No, so suppose, let's, for argument's sake, we have a lot that's 10,000 square feet. 10% of 10,000 is what? Right. So that's what we talked about, right?
Mhm.
So that's why you would need that in there. Because you wouldn't want it to be 10%, it would be 900.
And you're saying that the current regulations for single family say that the single family home can only cover 10% of the parcel?
Let me double check that. If I'm not correct.
Sorry, so on
Let me double check.
number 2, 1216-010, it says principal, coverage principal building. So we're saying this is coming from our single families, and it's saying 10% for the principal building.
Yeah, let me double check that.
I think it might be 30%.
Yeah, that should be 30. Yes, 30%.
Do you want me to, is there a follow?
Yeah, no, okay,
Yeah,
that's a correction.
let me just look at one other thing. Yes. So that is clerical error. I'm just gonna check one other thing. That would be my mistake, probably was. I'm just gonna quickly look at something while we're moving on.
And the reason why I mention that is because we're supposed to treat accessory dwelling units like single family homes. And so I think that the coverage for the accessory building would have to be 30%.
Or you could look at it as they have to be treated with the same regulations as single-family homes. And single-family homes already have regulations for accessory structures. And that's essentially what, if you're building a freestanding ADU, it is an accessory structure. So it's accessory to the principal building.
But if you're adding on, that's when it's gonna become part of the principal dwelling.
And that's when you get to the 30%. Because then your principal structure is being affected. So it'd be handled differently, depending on if it's, all these are handled differently. And the 3 ways that you can create an ADU, one is to stay within the existing structure of the house, one is to add on to the house, and one is to build something in the back.
But if it's in the existing structure, like in the basement or that, and it's not expanding the size of the principal structure, then it doesn't add any additional building coverage.
Right, and you'd never touch those 2 regulations.
But it still can't be more than 900 square feet.
Correct. Well, yeah, otherwise there could be another unit.
That's just better part, you have another.
Yeah.
just clarify.
Define to me what has to be included in 900 square feet. I'll give you a real life example. If I have a garage, do I have to put a bathroom in that ADU or can they use the house?
No.
Detached.
No, the accessory dwelling unit has to have all of the requirements for a dwelling unit. So it has to have provisions for eating, sleeping,
Okay.
food preparation, cooking, and sanitation.
And then the follow-up to that is what's included in the entire footprint? Because I know sometimes you look at apartments, they don't include closets. Does the 900 include all of it, livable space, or is it like get technical?
I believe the legislative intent, it doesn't get that granular.
Yeah.
I believe it's the entire footprint of the accessory dwelling unit.
And my final question for that is, if you add an ADU to more than a 4 family, the sprinklers have to do if it's detached?
If you add an ADU,
So that would make it, where the requirement of sprinklers come in.
if you add an ADU
Yeah.
to a two-family, to anything that is 2 units or more,
Yeah,
the ADU would need to be sprinkled, yes.
okay, sorry, thank you.
All right, go ahead, Michelle.
You asked about garages, the garages count towards it? You asked about garages, right?
I asked if I took my garage and took a car, right, do I have to put a bathroom in this section? And the answer is, I think, yes.
All right, Michelle. you want-
Yeah, I just wanted to know, and this is an administrative error, the 10%, a clerical error,
All right.
because I have an earlier draft and it has 30%, so that's my mistake that I must have typed it wrong when I reformatted or something, so.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Yes.
Council Spatafor,
Let's get Michelle. Keep going.
just to clarify a question that was already asked, Michelle responds, it does say half the gross floor area of the principal dwelling. So that would be,
Let's hold off on the garage discussion.
So the 900 square feet is everything, closets, kitchens, everything. Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Walls, stairs.
Yeah.
gross floor area, footprint.
All right, go ahead.
So I do want to just, again, that is, we're going to consider that a Scrivener's error, we're not substantively changing 10% to 30%, that's a clerical mistake, so.
Yeah, no,
I just want that clear for the record, okay, we're not proposing a substantive change to coverage. Okay, so moving on to table of off-street parking and loading regulations. Again, there's a table already in the ordinance that has minimum parking and has minimum loading for all the different use categories that we have. So we're adding now accessory dwelling unit. It's going to refer you to a subsection that we'll get to, because it can't be written in a, table, what the requirements are. So it's gonna refer you down to another subsection. No loading bays or spaces are required. Do you want to skip to that section so that we can talk about parking now, or what do you want
Sure, I
to
mean,
do, or
that's
just
just
keep
the-
going in order?
That's section 4, right? So that's the medium dwelling section.
It's coming up, I mean,
232,
well, maybe we should go in order.
Okay, yeah, we'll keep going.
I'm trying to move quickly here, so, okay, so then we're adding, the proposal is to add a new subsection. This would come under the administration section of the certificates and permits. So it's not a use regulation, it's going in the administration section. And we would be adding, site plan review for accessory dwelling units. So this is how the section would read. You first have the purpose and intent. The purpose and intent is, it says, is to provide for site plan review of accessory dwelling units protected by Mass General laws. There's a typo there. Chapter 48, section 3. The intent of this ordinance to address the potential impacts of the addition of an accessory dwelling unit to a property may have on the surrounding neighborhood, adjacent residences, including but not limited to impacts related to health, safety, density, congestion, nuisance, and parking, and to comply with Mass General laws, chapter 48, section 3, the so-called Affordable Homes Act. 2, applicability. Prior to the issuance of any building permit or certificate of occupancy, the establishment, alteration, change, extension, or reconstruction of an accessory dwelling unit, a site plan review and site plan review approval from the site plan review committee shall be required pursuant to this section, except where a special permit is required under this ordinance. Again, there's going to be a separate section for special permits for accessory dwelling units, the second and subsequent ones. This is just telling you when it's going to apply. This further goes on to say the building commissioner or zoning enforcement officer shall determine whether a unit is an accessory dwelling unit. This determination may be appealed to the Board of Appeals, an administrative appeal under this ordinance. So that means when somebody walks in and applies, Nelson's going to make a determination. Does this meet accessory dwelling unit definition, which the potential would mean? You may say, well, what do you mean? What's an example? The best example would be, a storefront that has no residential units, and they say, I'd like to add an accessory dwelling unit. They cannot. That would be adding a unit. It wouldn't come in under this set of regs. We'll get to that when we get to the definition. The definition says an accessory dwelling unit is added to a principal dwelling. Okay, so there's already a dwelling unit there. So you're not starting from scratch with a factory and adding a unit. But keep in mind, if there is a storefront with a unit above it, they could come in, potentially apply for the accessory dwelling. So the key thing is there has to be a unit already in existence.
Can I have more information?
You're good.
So you're telling me, right? So every storefront in Highland Ave that has an apartment upstairs, you turn around tomorrow and say, I don't want no more business tenants, I'm gonna put all apartments.
I wouldn't say that. First off, we'd look at Highland Ave and
Yeah.
we'd see, is the property you're talking about in the correct district? That's
Yeah.
the first inquiry.
Yeah.
Yes, it's in the correct district. It's either in Residence A on Highland Ave or it's in neighborhood business,
Yeah.
I even say. So that's first threshold's met. Yes, it's in the right district. Then we're gonna look at, is there already a dwelling unit there?
Yeah.
If there is, they move forward to the next step, potential for the accessory
By
dwelling
right,
unit.
they could put, they could,
By right in the sense of it's allowed, we are recommending you still go through a site plan review process,
Yes.
however. So, they can't get rid of all businesses. If there was, for example, one business, or we saw a recent petition on Highland Ave that were 3 units in a vacant storefront, needed to come in through the special permit process, they would not need to come in through the special permit process. They'd come in and say, I'd like to use that as an accessory dwelling unit. They still have to comply with all the rules and regs, but that space would be there. Now, if there's 2 businesses, they eliminate one, that's the by right one. If they want to do a second accessory dwelling unit, then that's kicking into the special permit. Keep in mind, though, that business, if they wanted to get rid of the businesses anyway, they could already come in under a zoning and apply for a special
Yeah.
permit. So there's already a route for them to eliminate the
so
businesses.
they're not by right.
They're not by right. And only one unit would be by right. So, they'd have to decide what they want to do.
All right, good.
Okay, so keep moving, keep going.
Yeah, keep going, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So now we get to, and the appeal thing, I just want to briefly mention. So if Nelson makes a decision, you can't go, you're not an accessory dwelling unit. They don't then appeal to the Board of Appeal, or if there's any issue with his decision, they're gonna wait till they go through the process and then they would do the appeal sign. Is that correct? We were told to do that, so there'd be one appeal process.
Yes.
Okay. It's still, an administrative appeal. I'm sorry, no, that's not what this says, I misspoke. So this does say the determination could be appealed to the Board of Appeal or Administrative Appeal. The other appeal, okay, forget everything I just said, the other appeal provision we did not include. Okay. Scope of site plan review. Under this section, site plan review shall be limited to this inquiry. What reasonable regulations concerning the bulk and height of structures, as well as determining yard sizes, lot area, setbacks, open space, parking, building coverage requirements, if any, should be imposed on the use. This is, needs to be slightly modified, and we'll present this at the hearing. I used a different section of 3A when I was preparing that, and we didn't have the guidelines at the time, and I want to make sure our ordinance does mirror the state law. The guidelines may change, as I mentioned the other night. So bulk and height of structures, dimensional setbacks, parking is not one that's named in this section of 3A. It's named in other sections of 3A. So I think a couple of these areas may not be part of the scope of review, and I will have that worked out with the city solicitor and finalized before we get to the hearing. This list is too broad, is what I'd like to say. It covers more than, it's my understanding, we're going to be able to look at for site plan review of this particular type of protected use. We are allowed to look at those, but the other uses, churches and schools, so.
Question, Councilman Dunn?
Yeah, I understand I'm off committee, so.
Go ahead, Ian.
So is the assumption here that there's a single site plan review committee for all accessory dwelling units? Is that correct? And would that be essentially the same? I mean, it looks the same process as you would do for, yes, any of these other things.
So we're gonna come to that. The setup, the site plan review is later, so why don't we
Okay.
just go through the process?
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to clarify that some of that language is going to come out, because again, I wrote it a little too broadly. But I will work with the city solicitor on that. Yeah, so, but it is important to note the scope of site plan review is going to be limited. So then we have general requirements. I don't even know if I should read all these. They kind of speak for themselves. The accessory dwelling unit shall conform to all requirements, comply with the regulations. There's no variance of any provision of the section. Short-term rental of an accessory dwelling unit is prohibited. Any accessory dwelling unit shall conform to the building, fire, sanitary codes. Written proof of compliance shall be provided prior to beginning the site plan review process. Provisions regarding non-conforming uses, lots, buildings, and structures shall not apply to accessory dwelling units. And then, if the establishment of an accessory dwelling unit creates a violation of dimensional controls and or parking requirements for the principal dwelling, for example, it eliminates open space or parking required in the existing dwelling, the violation shall require variance. So we can't require variances of any type for the accessory dwelling units. However, if the creation of it is displacing parking or open space, we are recommending this be included so that the city has a chance to address those new violations. So again, the existing house, whether it's single or multifamily, has requirements for parking, has requirements for open space, things like that. If any of that is changing or getting displaced, whether it's because the garage that previously provided parking no longer provides parking, or an addition is now taking up the majority of the yard and open space, we want to be able to address that.
So I think, Councilor, you had a question related to this one, right? Because
Yeah, so this makes sense for a building that was built after zoning existed, but for pre-existing non-conforming properties, they're not required to have, the vast majority are not required to have anything like that. So how would pre-existing non-conforming properties be impacted by this?
Pre-existing non-conforming properties are pre-existing non-conforming as long as they're in their pre-existing non-conforming condition or
Make it-
geometry.
you'll make it worse.
So as soon as you change a pre-existing non-conforming structure, it doesn't matter if it's before zoning or after zoning, whatever that changes, you need to comply with. So it's a good example is that when people come in to add a bedroom to a house, if you have a house that has no parking, it was built in 1900, you don't have to have any parking. But if you're going to add a bedroom and now you have 4 bedrooms in that house, we require you to show that you have 4 parking spots because you're now under the new requirements because you're changing your pre-existing non-conforming structure. And then you go to the Board of Appeals, get a variance.
If we wanted to extend the benefit of the non-conformity, could we add something that says that this does not
all right,
apply?
but that's getting into, like, I wanted to have Michelle go through before we talk about amendments, okay? So I think that's a clarification, and we can follow up with that later. I'd just like to have Michelle go through. But yeah. before we
Yeah,
start,
the point is, as Nelson said, any increase in violations, we need to address that. To say we're going to allow the ADU is one thing, to say we're going to allow new violations and, increased violations is something else.
So, but just to be clear,
Yeah.
like if a
That's why
house
that's in here.
like has 3 bedrooms and 1 parking space, but is built for the requirement for more parking, they want an ADU, they're going to have new parking space for any bedroom above they have.
Not for the ADU.
No, if a building has 3 bedrooms and 1 parking spot, and you're gonna put an ADU on that property, and you're gonna put that ADU on that parking spot.
Oh,
So
yeah.
now the building has 0 parking spots,
Yeah,
you're
right.
making that condition worse.
Right.
You've lost your pre-existing non-conforming status, you go get a variance.
But like if you're keeping that 1 spot and just doing the ADU, you don't have to create
No,
2 more parking spots.
right.
All right. Okay, so so
We're talking about increasing violations, just like we would on anything else.
all
if
right.
it
So
wasn't
I
an
think
ADU.
that was a little
Yeah.
bit of confusion. Would you
Can I ask
have
a
to
clarifying
make?
question on that?
Okay, Kate. Yeah.
So I'll give you a literal example. My house is 1,500 square feet, but it's 4 bedrooms. I have a 3-car driveway and a 1-car garage. If I came in and applied, I wouldn't meet these dimensional controls, but this is just a for instance. If I came in and wanted to turn the garage into an ADU up to 900 square feet, I'm losing a parking space, right, by taking down the garage. Do I get rejected for the ADU, or do I get pulled to the Board of Appeal the next time I want to make an improvement to the house and I'm now not
How many
conforming
bedrooms do you have?
4?
3.
And one of them has no closet.
The other one's
So right now, you're in compliance with our parking regulations, you have one per bedroom. You'd be taking one of them, becoming non-compliant. So
Yeah.
now the principal structure, not the accessory dwelling unit, the principal structure is now non-compliant, so you can get a variance for the principal structure,
But not for the ADU.
not the ADU.
So you could do the ADU, but anything else that you do to the principal structure.
Well, I would argue you'd have to get the variance for the principal structure prior to getting the ADU, because if you get denied the variance for the principal structure,
But like,
you
what am
can't
I
get
doing
a
at
parking spot.
that point? You're not, you take it.
Yeah, I would say it's not anything you do, anything you do that's creating violations and nonconformities. You could potentially put an addition on your house.
Yeah.
That gives you the ADU and keeps all your parking, you know?
Mhm.
Or you reconfigure your parking so you still have the 4 spaces, maybe you do double tandem, or, I don't know the configuration, but, you know, this is part of what I understand will be part of the review process,
Yeah.
you know, that you would go through before you propose something that's gonna be creating new violations and potential.
Yeah, I mean, it helps for me to think about a literal example when I think how to explain it to other
So Mel, did you have one?
Same situation, your garage. So let's say instead of eliminating the garage parking space, you now build up on your garage to make the accessory dwelling unit, not eliminating the parking spot.
Don't need five.
Does the garage count towards the 900 square feet?
Oh, interesting.
No,
No,
only the ADU.
only the ADU.
It's the size of the ADU.
But the ADU could use that parking garage for parking if they wanted to.
We can't regulate who uses the parking spots.
Yeah.
You could have 4 parking spots and she could rent them to her neighbor for all we know.
Okay.
All we care is that you provide the number of parking spots you're supposed to provide for your bedrooms.
Okay, different situation. Same garage.
Use your house.
Garage, no, garage, no, but so now we're building an ADU with the garage underneath it, and it's gonna be used by the ADU. Does the garage count towards the 900 square feet?
No,
It never does.
it's not part of the dwelling unit.
Oh, okay.
Well, let's see, Councilman Lynn Hanrahan and then Councilman Bedford.
Shoot, what was I gonna say? Oh, the setbacks in that scenario. If you have a garage, you meet the garage setbacks, but you build an ADU on top. Does it have to be these setbacks or the garage setbacks that we have in our zoning? I ask because this is like what most of the houses in the West End really are, is they're like a lot with a garage right on the corner next to their neighbor. And the impacts, I think, are gonna be when people try to pick apart these kind of rules and build way up, and then they're overlooking, you know, their neighbor's pool or
Somebody's deck.
I
something.
think that would require some thought, and my inclination would say you'd be in setbacks on the ADU,
Yeah,
just to kind of back that up with a conversation that we had with some legal advice for people that, you know, eat, breathe, and sleep Massachusetts zoning law. There is some opinion out there that if you have a garage that doesn't comply with setbacks and you can convert it to an ADU, you can actually send the property owner to the Board of Appeals for the garage, for the conversion to a new use, and then send the ADU use to the site plan review
oh my
committee.
God.
So I mean, that's something that, you know, we all can't forget. This law was passed a while ago. This guidance came out not that long ago. That guidance turned into regulations not approved yet, and we have 3 weeks.
But
So
there's
there's a
architects
lot,
ready to go to help people, right? I mean,
there are architects ready to go. Yep.
Because it's mine.
yeah, exactly.
Councilman Bedford.
I gotta clarify a question here. I know we're talking about, making a non-conforming use worse, right? But also, what, from your standpoint, when does the threshold kick in where if, I'll use Council Lillian's situation, she adds to that garage, and say it's a $100,000 job. When does that have to, would she have to update her house to new building codes now? Because this is a threshold, right? We have to update to the new, like, electrical standards and plumbing. Would that affect ADUs too? Like, hey, I'm gonna spend $100,000 in my house. Does that make the main primary use upgrade their electrical, HVAC, and all the other things?
So the monetary thresholds for code compliance
It's high.
are only with handicap accessibility,
Oh, okay.
which doesn't apply to 1 and 2 family.
And these don't have to be handicap accessible either, right?
1 and 2 family homes do not have to.
No, the
apply.
ADU.
They're a single family home. Single family homes, 2 family homes do not.
So what happens if you have it on the second floor?
What do you mean?
If you add it on the ADU on the second floor, doesn't have to be handicap accessible.
No, handicap accessibility laws do not apply to 1 and 2 family homes of any kind.
Okay. So let's keep rolling on. We got about 20 minutes left, so
So design standards, which is section 5, siting and location. This accessory dwelling unit may be allowed only in a property that contains a building with at least one single-family residential dwelling unit. I'm glad Nelson just mentioned the guidelines, because we, previously, before the guidelines came out, our siting and location that we're gonna recommend was different, because it didn't say this. It led us to believe that this would only apply to single-family dwellings, okay? That you would add an ADU to a single-family dwelling. It wasn't defined as any building with a unit in it. So if that changes, everybody needs to be forewarned, we would want to change this. If that part of the guideline doesn't get finalized, we want to, obviously take the best interpretation from Alden. So this is in here because of what the guideline says. Some of these things are based on the guidelines, which again are draft. Relationship to principal dwelling may be located in the same building as the principal dwelling. In addition to the same building as the principal dwelling, or in a building detached. Again, that came out in the guidelines. It was not clear in the law that we had to allow detached additions or within the unit. And, I know, without overstepping, I know the mayor submitted comments, and one of the concerns he had was that in a city like Malden, we should be able to decide based on the property whether it's more appropriate to have the ADU in detached or require it be contained in the unit, or it could be an addition, given the density in Malden and all the unique characteristics of all the lots in neighborhoods and streets. So again, that having to allow it in those 3 different forms is in the draft guideline.
that's another point.
So in preparation for this, I did read the law, the draft regulations, and watch the various webinars. And I did see that one of the things that they were saying is that we need to be treating these like single-family homes because it's a protected use. And so one of the questions they asked was, do you require a site plan review for single-family homes? And if you do not, they might view that as not a reasonable regulation. But then they said, but it might be reasonable to require site plan review for detached ADUs. So I think that there's a way that we might be able to encourage attached ADUs in the existing structure by not requiring site plan review and requiring a site plan review for the more invasive ones that Councilor Linehan was talking about, where you're talking about putting it on a garage or in a shed.
Getting to amendments, let's keep going, but yeah, that's something we can look for.
So that again, based on the proposed guidance, dimensional requirements basically just states that it'll be regulated by the requirements in the section we already went through. Include this 12607G reference that says it shall not apply to accessory dwelling units in a detached structure or building. That's a special setback requirement for accessory structures, not for whole units. So again, as Councilor just said, we're supposed to treat these as if it's a whole single family unit, which it is. It's a whole other dwelling unit. So the setbacks for a garage or a shed are different from setbacks for a dwelling unit. So that special subsection that applies, as I said, to garages and sheds, is not recommended to apply to whole single family units. So as Nelson had mentioned, changing the use, it's no longer a garage, it's now a dwelling unit. D is any expansion of the building's footprint or addition for an accessory dwelling unit shall comply with all dimensional control, shall be limited to that required to provide access egress pursuant to the building code. That is trying to have a design standard that will allow us to address some of the issues that we're going to have when these accessory dwelling units are in the form of additions. And it's really no different than if a person wanted to put an addition on a single family dwelling for a family room or another bedroom or, expand their kitchen. They would need to comply with the rules and regs. So for consistency, we're recommending that. Size, maximum size of accessory dwelling with 900 square feet. or half the size of the smallest existing dwelling unit in the principal dwelling. I don't know why this says whichever is greater. I think it's supposed to be whichever is smaller.
That's,
No, maximum. Is that correct? Is this right or wrong? The
I
maximum?
think it's whichever is smaller.
It's whichever.
Yeah, I think it's
Whichever is
smaller.
smaller. Okay.
900 would be the top.
Okay, so that's.
That's what the law says.
That's right, yeah, smaller. I want to just note, this says half the size of the smallest existing dwelling unit. We spoke briefly before, this could be proposed in a 3-family dwelling. Each unit in the 3-family could be a different size. We want to tie it back to the smallest unit, is what's being recommended here. You know, sometimes it's just a small unit in the attic, sometimes the unit takes up 2 floors. So that's what's being recommended. Layout, maximum number of kitchens in accessory dwelling unit is 1. Might seem like a surprise when you say that, but I think we need to say that. And again, that's how we treat single-family dwellings as well, 1 kitchen per unit. Open space, required open space shall be provided for an accessory dwelling unit in conformance with the minimum usable open space requirements of this ordinance. This council's worked diligently over the past few years on updating your open space requirements. Pervious, within the yard setbacks, visible to the public. So we want any open space being provided for these new units to have to provide the same type of open space for any other unit in the city. And meet those requirements. Parking requirements. So the law says that for property that is within 1/2 mile of an MBTA, rapid transit, commuter rail, or bus station, no parking shall be required for an accessory dwelling unit. The guidelines define bus station to be any bus route. So A is what the law says. Subsection A is what the law says, right? We're reflecting what the law says. If the ABU is on a property located within 1/2 mile of Oak Grove, Malden Center, no parking space is required. B, for property located more than 1/2 mile from the MBTA, Oak Grove, 1 parking space shall be required for the accessory dwelling unit. Again, in conformance with parking requirements, saying that are applicable to all of the parking. Distance shall be measured from property line to property line. D, however, is what's added here because this is what's in the guideline. So bus station has been broadly expanded to include any bus route. Again, the mayor did submit comments about that. I believe some of the councilors did as well. As to how broad that is. And as I mentioned at the presentation the other night, that means the entire city. The entire city is located within 1/2 mile of a T station or a bus stop. So that means no parking could be required for anything anywhere in the city.
Yeah. Councilor, do you have a question?
It's actually about the last section.
Hopefully, maybe before we get to, the date when you're gonna enroll in our name, maybe we'll have more guidance. I'm not sure the state's gonna finalize its guidelines before that. So I think, and I'll work with the city solicitor, we may, want to add something in here, if the guideline changes and bus station no longer is bus route, we don't want that in our ordinance, right? We don't want to define it. It's not required to be defined that way. So maybe we can add something in that will be subject to state guidelines.
Councilor O'Malley?
Just before we move on to the next section, under 5 design standards, section E, you had said it was the smallest existing dwelling unit. I was looking at the draft guidelines, 71.02, and it says that it's half of the gross floor area of the principal dwelling. But not unit. So the way I read that is it's the entire dwelling, not just a unit.
Well, principal dwelling, I hear what you're saying. Principal dwelling is defined.
A structure, regardless of whether it conforms with zoning, including use requirements, blah, 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 blah.
That contains
At least one dwelling unit. So that would be the entire structure of the dwelling.
If it's a two-family, then we'll go up to 3 units. So
half the entire gross floor area of the dwelling of the entire 2 or 3 family. But it cannot be in under any circumstances more than that.
Right, so that's maybe something that we'll have to look at.
I mean, 900 square
900
feet
square
is still
feet
gonna
still-
be the max.
Yeah, exactly.
Half of a brick
So-
family's a lot more than 900.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so, we'll look at,
Right.
whether we need to amend that or fix that. Okay,
We're going to 7.
so 7, submission requirements. So these would be the materials required to be submitted for application for site plan review. I'm not gonna read them all.
The page.
Some of it obviously might not apply, there may not be signs or things like that on a single-family home, but if we're adding an ADU, with the proposals to add the ADU to a commercial building with this units, then it might apply, so, this is obviously where applicable. Site plan review committee, composition, site plan review committee for accessory dwelling units. We have the following 3 members: a city council designated by the city council president, the director of public health, a designee, director of OSPCD, a designee. This designee shall be a member of OSPCD staff. And then the quorum, all members of the committee required to conduct the business, so 3 members need to be present.
So I just have a question. Is the intent that there would be a new committee for every special site plan review, or would there be just one council appointed for the whole year? That was kind of Carrie's question. That's, I guess,
I mean, I think you, on your other committees, your road quarry site plan review committee and your RAO site plan review committee, I think you have a counselor designated, right? The president designates who's on the committee.
so you're saying like, just as we did last week, there would just be one person appointed for the whole year. It wouldn't be for each, let's say there's
Unless you
20
want
committees.
to.
So that's something we have to discuss, but that's just,
Yeah. it's-
you didn't have that's just something. It was a little
Designated,
unclear. I was going in with the thought that it would change for every site plan, every application, but that's not necessary. So we have to clarify that.
I mean, I think for consistency, I wouldn't think you'd want the same person, at least.
Yeah, no, it might, that's one of the questions I put to Alicia about if we didn't have, if we changed, that might actually be not consistent with the, the Dover amendment, or whatever that, it makes it too political, so.
So then the rest of these are really procedural, public hearing. Site review committee is going to conduct a public hearing in accordance with law, and the notice provisions of our ordinance, so abutters will be notified, and the public will have a chance to comment. Decision, so the decision the committee may approve the conditions or deny an application for site plan approval. Any denial of an application shall be predicated only upon applicant's failure to provide necessary information. Making its decision, the committee will be guided exclusively by the state law. They'll require to file a written decision. They don't, there's a constructive approval, appeal. This is the appeal provision that I was referencing previously. So appeal is made under state law, state zoning law to court, severability. If any provision is deemed to be invalid because contrary to regulations are promulgated by EOHLC, all of the provisions remain in full force and effect. That, I still think we need to add that other provision that would have, like, for example, that bus station provision doesn't go into effect if the guidelines get changed. So I'll work with City Solicitor on that. New section, this is the section that would be for special permits for second or subsequent accessory dwelling units, so more than one. And basically, this is the same special permit criteria for all other special permits for residential in the city zoning ordinance. Same criteria, same standards, et cetera. And then finally, the definitions. This definition for accessory dwelling unit is taken from the state law, so self-contained housing unit includes sleeping, cooking, sanitation, as Nelson said. Maintains a separate entrance, here's the code requirements in terms of size. May not be used for short-term rental, conforms to the regs. And then finally, the section on non-conforming uses, lots, buildings and structures. The recommendation in this paper is to add a new section that says the provisions of that section shall not apply to accessory dwelling units. That section of regs includes a lot of regs that regulate our non-conforming. It exempts out singles and twos. It gives, there's special provisions for 3 families that we talked about in one of those last papers, and I'm going to talk about again tonight. It also has special provisions for uses in residential districts and business districts that require special permits for certain changes. These will not be subject to those. This is, ADUs are gonna have their own set of regs. We don't want them mixed in with all the other stuff. As I said previously, if somebody just wants to add units, they can come in and petition to add units to an existing commercial, a multi-family building. They can eliminate the storefront already. They can do, so if they want to go in under that section of the zoning, that's what they're doing. If they want to propose that they're an ADU, they'll come in under the section that we are proposing to create. So that's everything.
So it's about 5 of 7. I kind of deferred to Council President O'Malley about, we did not kind of cover any discussion about, particular provisions. Would we want to adjourn and have the council, or would we want to go forward a little bit, Councilor Mayor?
So I'll definitely open up to the room, but I know we are on a very tight deadline. And I think for transparency's sake, if we want to make amendments, it would make sense to try to make amendments before the public hearing so that it can be vetted and people actually have an opportunity, because we can always make changes after. But I think from a transparency's perspective, is that we should make them before to show them to the public. Would there be appetite to recess and come back after the council meeting if we are able to keep it short? Or do we want to schedule something for next week or an off night?
Yeah, I'm just thinking that, we're trying to get this all passed by the 20th.
Yeah, and then I just want to make clear. So you're not amending the paper. You would be making recommendations for amendments.
That with the intention of presenting that
At the hearing, right, but just so, you can't amend the paper at this point. You'd have to go out on the floor and amend it if you wanted to. And then we need to re-advertise.
We can amend it in committee, and we recommend it out.
You recommend amendments. The committee can't amend, to my knowledge, of all the the city clerk. I do. Yeah.
Not the final amendments, but we amend the ordinance in ordinance, which is very common. We then refer it out favorably as amended. It then goes to the full council where we receive the committee report, and then we accept the amendments recommended by the committee, or we don't. But you're right, we do have to take another vote to formally amend it on the floor, but amendments do happen.
But I think what she's saying is that you need to repost the public hearing if you made any amendments.
Are you saying after the public hearing, Council?
I'm saying before, because
I don't think you do that, 'cause it's posted.
it can't be a substantive. How do you say that word?
We got it.
The
Substantive.
committee just makes recommendations in its report, right?
Substantive.
But I think some of the intent here was to have discussion in advance of the public hearing, because there's a lot to go through, and that is the type of thing we're going to be. The public hearing is the day before the council meeting where we might discuss amendments. So some of it is to get a sense of that. So, and then that was one reason why I did submit and the council approved last time to have paper that can be discussed. So Council Linehan would,
Can we meet on the 21st to continue discussion and then be in the hearing on the Monday night after, and then we would enroll and ordain?
Yeah, I'd be willing to kind of go over my paper, just to explain, the contrast. I didn't necessarily think that we would be trying to amend it before the hearing, but at least to explain, why I chose some of the things to propose and submit that. So I think that's just, as Michelle had the opportunity to kind of explain, we could do that. They take a recess and come back at 8 o'clock and do that. So yeah,
I would move to recess.
okay. So does
Until
anyone
when?
want
Until after.
Until after.
Tonight?
Everybody can manage that.
I don't think that, this is complex. I mean,
Okay.
it's simple in that we can't change that much in the state law, but
Yeah.
we've got a 2-hour meeting easily ahead of us. I don't
Agree.
personally want to come back and dive into something this consequential tonight. I'd rather we meet on committee night next week and just
Right.
continue discussion.
So I mean, I think what we would do is maybe schedule it next week's council of the whole.
Next week is council of the whole. We don't have anything
So I think.
hard and fast that's in place as far as
Yeah.
committee meetings next week.
Yeah.
So you guys could take 5:30 to 7 and just make it a whole hour and a half.
I would
meeting.
actually
Do
prefer it
whatever
to
you
be
want.
7:05. I would prefer it to be after, that way we would not have any time constraints. So
Well,
I have some
Have a
things,
committee of the whole, you don't have to stop at 7
We
o'clock.
don't
There
have
is
a
no
committee.
committee meeting next week.
but I guess I would, my preference, I do have some things in rules and ordinance I would like to take up. We have the charter that we want to discuss. So I feel like this, we don't have to, but we can go to 7. So we can talk about the schedule, but my preference would be to not, yeah, we could recess or whatever. But I would just anticipate, if we wait till next week, I would take this up after some other business, rules and ordinance, and then we could go. But I don't want to predict it to be done by 7. So that's just what I would say.
Can I have a point of information too?
So yeah, but.
I would just hope, I know I've asked, and I don't expect it this week, but there's some different changes that Council Widow's papers and proposed paper by, I think, the city. Is there any way you could give us the delta on these numbers? Because
Yeah, agreed.
I want to know if we, based on Council, and it's his paper, so I'm not trying to be negative. If his paper, you're going to tell me it's 4,000 more units, I want to know that. I think the public should know that. So if we have an idea, generalist, I know you can't be exact, because not everyone's going to do it. But
Yeah, we have, and I can, we were gonna present a lot of data at the hearing, but I can commit to next week. We already have the census data, we have the assessor's data. We can tell you how many single families are in the city, how many 2 families, in which districts. We can definitely give you that information. I'm not sure if we can give information about even which units have detached.
no, I just want a general, I don't
Yeah,
expect.
we have a lot of that data already,
Yeah,
so,
I mean,
yes,
I guess
we can't
some of
tell.
that, like, you proposed 7,500. If we went with that, how many possible ADUs would be out there? I put 5,000. What would it be the difference? That type
Well,
of
keep
thing.
in mind, those are gonna be reasonable regulations that the committee's gonna look at.
Yeah,
So that's not, you can't apply if you don't have 7,500. Those are gonna be reasonable regulations and dimensional controls. Bulk, height of structures, yard setbacks, that's how the site plan review works for Dover amendments. At least that's my understanding of it.
but then you can't say there can't be any relief or variance. So that, I guess that's something we'll have to talk about a little bit more. But all right, so so
Just to add to that, I feel like I would love to hear next week, not in the public hearing, how many
Yes.
households fall under the 7,500 versus the 5,000. I know that you don't know how many units could be built, but I just want to know how many literal properties are that size.
I met with Nate Kramer today,
Okay.
city assessor, to discuss this.
Okay, yeah.
We don't have these numbers yet, to
Okay,
be clear, because
All right, so-
I know the next thing that's gonna come out is the request for
yeah,
how many single-family homes have a yard.
Yeah.
He is going to work with our GIS people to see if they can pull their systems together and try to draw some of these numbers together, but we don't know how granular we can get that information.
Pivot table.
I mean, it sounds like it's
So,
hard.
but yeah, I think that's sort of the sense we want to get, and that's the type of thing. I think we're, the standard lot had been traditionally 5,000 or 6,000 feet. 7,500 was the standard that was developed, post kind of the moratorium we had 10 years ago. So that seemed to be maybe too rigid to start. So that's really kind of the discussion of there. So reasonableness. So it is after 7. So We will not recess, I guess, and come back next week. And, what?
We
You-
just had, I just
Okay.
want to add, for the amount of, when you're getting those numbers, if we can just be clear when we're saying that,
I know,
because
but I also-
that's when you're going to be billed. That's my fear, that
I
everybody's
don't
getting
know,
scared
it's like
that
the MBTA.
just
Change
because
a
they
little bit.
can, people are
So I'd
going
rather
to it,
just
takes
go into
money, it sounds like all these,
We
a lot
can
of
do
variables.
highest standard, and then-
It's not up to you to say, but up to us.
Just super quickly on Councilor Coloni's point, it would be very helpful to know municipalities like Salem, which did authorize ADUs prior to this law, what did they observe actually getting?
That's right.
Do you, is it possible to
It's
just?
gotta be a
Is
little
that
bit.
Salem requires any affordable units?
I would still like to know that.
I mean, that's what we need. That's what I'm saying. Yeah,
And there
it was
are-
built
So
for
there's going to be any investment.
that mother.
I understand, I'm just
But
curious.
my point is.
Okay.
How-
All right,
Anything you can
so,
say on that?
all right, so a motion to table by Council Linehan, seconded by Council. All in favor, say aye, so motion to adjourn
And like you said.
by Councilman Taylor, seconded by Councilman O'Malley, all in favor, say aye. Okay.
Oh, you have a cat, so you. I'm saying like, there's gotta be a little bit of like.